Okay, cool. So this is Thirst for Knowledge. Everyone here, I'm sure, is aware. And so we're a monthly event that tries to take science out of the lecture hall out to the public. And if you want to follow our events, you can look us up on Facebook or Twitter. And we also have a mailing list. If you want to give us your email at the end, you can just talk to Christina. And so we're going to have a talk tonight from Dr. Melyssa Roy, who is a public health doctor at Dunedin. Sorry, she was at the Department of Medicine where she did her PhD, and she's going to be talking about that work tonight on the Paleo, fasting, and Mediterranean diets. And so if you can hold your questions till the end, and everyone at home, you can enter your questions via the question and answer box or the chat box. That would be great. So take it away.
Thank you. So I'll see if I can navigate the technical issues and I'll see how I go. All right. Hello, everyone at home. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the knowledge. And hopefully everyone knows that they were here to listen to a story about diets. So I hope you've all got something to drink and maybe something to eat. And I'm going to introduce you to the somewhat depressing science of diet research. So this was, back in the day, about 5 or 6 years ago, it seemed like a good idea to do a PhD. So I'm medical by training, and my department said, what would you like to do your PhD on, Melyssa? I'm like, I'm kind of interested in this paleo diet thing. And everyone went, really? But anyway, fast forward 5 years, and here we are. So what happened was my PhD was a clinical trial for the SWIFT study, which essentially was looking at a number of things. But one of the things we looked at was what were the effects of fasting, paleo, and Mediterranean diets. And what I was really interested in was not so much mechanistic science kind of understanding of these diets, but did it actually work for real people? So there's a whole lot of hype. I don't know if everyone remembers paleo back in the day, about 5 or 6 years ago. Every second headline was paleo, eat like a caveman. And then fasting was one of those things that sort of emerged over time, maybe over the last decade, is that fasting was kind of a wonder diet that was going to stop you getting cancer, that was going to make you thin, and you could still pretty much eat what you wanted. So all these seemed like really novel approaches, and I was quite interested in seeing whether they're as good as they sounded. So I'm just going to quickly talk to what these diets actually are. Most people have a pretty good understanding of food and what diets are because we all have to eat. And the Mediterranean diet, I think everyone's got a sort of a rough idea of what that involves. It's kind of your standard healthy diet that your doctor would probably put you on. So it's eat lots of fresh fruit and veggies, whole grains, olive oil, seeds. You can have some protein, but we'd probably recommend sort of lower fat proteins and fish. And I guess the idea really was for the Mediterranean diet was less of the saturated fats, so your butter and your cream and your red meats. And like all diets, sadly, limiting sugar and refined foods. But the good thing, I guess, about the Mediterranean diet for lots of people, if you choose to drink, which I see some of you do, then a glass of red wine was part of this diet. So this has been around for a long time. Everyone's pretty familiar with the idea of a Mediterranean diet. So what are the alternatives? Intermittent fasting, and you might have heard of this as the fast diet or the 5-2 diet. So the idea behind this was really, really simple. On 2 days a week, you basically eat a whole lot less. So it's not a complete fast, but you eat about 25% of what you would normally eat. For those people who are used to counting calories, for a woman that's about 500 calories over a day, or a man it's just slightly more. And they're kind of wondering what that would be. That would kind of be like a salad for lunch and some food for dinner. So it's not a lot of food, but it's only 2 days a week. And in our study, we said people could eat whatever they wanted on the other days within reason. We said feasting days were basically eat a basic healthy diet, but if something that you wanted to enjoy that wasn't necessarily a healthy food, just go ahead. That was the point of this approach, that you didn't actually have to restrict your diet on every day. And we wanted to make these things doable for people. So you could choose your own days. You could choose which days suited you to fast. So if you're someone who didn't want to fast when you were at work, well, that was fine. You'd pick a different day. And also how you fast, we didn't actually dictate that. So we didn't say people should use a meal replacement. We didn't say you had to have 2 meals or 3 meals a day. We basically left it to people to choose. This is a real world study. So people could actually decide how they wanted to do fasting. All we asked was that they restricted the energy right down on those 2 days. Sorry, I might have just jumped off screen there. Sorry, home. And this was probably the more contentious diet, the paleo diet. So if anyone isn't familiar with the idea of the paleo or paleolithic diet, the theory came from that, you know, that we should eat as the cavemen did, or paleolithic people did, and that we haven't evolved enough to be able to eat grains and dairy, and a lot of our current problems with nutrition and health might have come from the idea that we are, you know, that we're not designed to eat these foods, or perhaps we're just at least eating too many of them. There's been a lot of debate in the world about what a paleo diet is and what it should include. One of my friends sent me a nice article saying that cavemen used to eat other people, and should I include that on my diet sheet? Didn't think that was ideal. So not really a consensus on precisely what Paleolithic people did eat, but we could probably agree that they weren't eating a lot of dairy products because they weren't milking cows. And probably because this was before the industrial or agricultural revolution, there wasn't been a lot of grains and legumes. So in ours, again, intended to be a more representative, you can stick on this diet for life. We didn't say you can never eat those things, but rather than kind of eat them ad lib, we suggested grains and legumes and dairy. Maybe just have one serving a day as opposed to eating them at every meal. So limiting them down, but not completely eliminating them. And this came up some debate. And the thing that you're not supposed to have on paleo diets are things that you just wouldn't have had in those days. So sugar, highly processed oils, and really refined foods. So what that means in practice is bread, breakfast cereals, muesli bars. None of those things were paleo. You know, there's no real paleo brownies, sadly. So why did I do this? Like, is there any evidence that these diets are any good? The Mediterranean diet's been around for probably as long as it's been in Mediterranean. So, and there's lots of evidence, both looking at populations, if you've heard of the blue zones where people seem to live forever, that people do very well on Mediterranean diets. And there's also been lots of trials that suggest that Mediterranean diets work really well. They're good for your health and they can help you lose weight. But obviously not everyone wants to do a Mediterranean diet. Fasting, new player on the block. There were quite a few trials and they did seem to work. So what we see in fasting trials is that people who do intermittent fasting seem to lose as much weight as people who restrict their energy every day by a lesser amount. So if you're someone who doesn't want to restrict your diet every single day, you just want to do it twice a week in a major way, it seems to be just as good or maybe slightly better. However, the problem with the trials out there in the real world is that it's kind of hard to do fasting. Don't know if anyone's tried it. You know, starving yourself is not really for the light-hearted. So it's all very well to show that, yes, okay, if you starve people in a trial, they lose weight. Congratulations. But in the real world, it's actually an approach that's going to work for people. So that's what we're interested in. The paleo research was a really, really limited field. There seemed to be a bunch of Scandinavians who were quite keen on it. And no one was quite sure precisely what the paleo was supposed to be, but they had some really limited trials in which they put people on diets with no dairy and no grains and no legumes. So basically they ate fruit and veggies and meat and nuts and eggs, and that was it. And yes, they did seem to work, but again, it was in the trial setting. So these are people who, you know, in a trial setting are supported to eat these really restricted diets. And again, we want to know, could people do that out in the real world when you have brownies and fish and chips and yummy things? So that's where we came from. So yeah, I don't know, and the trouble with science is we really love our randomized controlled trials. We really like to say, you have to eat that diet, you have to eat that diet, you eat that diet. We'll measure you and we'll see what happens. And that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't represent what happens. If you're someone out in the world, you choose to do something, you have to follow it on your own. So that's what we really wanted to know would happen. And I guess with my public health hat on, if we're going to make recommendations and say, okay, people should do X, Y, and Z sort of dieting for health, it's not enough to know that things can work. We actually have to know they do work. So we're allowed to say, if you do this, you can be healthier. We need to know that it will happen. So that was the point of a real world trial. It's pretty obvious we have a problem with nutrition in all developed countries. I mean, there's an obesity and diabetes epidemic. So we have current recommendations that are supported by evidence, but they're not working. Well, they're not working for 2/3 of people. So it seems really good that people might be able to have other options and other ways of eating that might suit them better. I mean, you might hate fish and red wine. The Mediterranean's just not going to do it for you. So we wanted to know if they worked. We wanted to know if people actually stuck to them, if people would fast or eat paleo for a whole year. And we wanted to know if they'd do it without help. So this is not, you get to see a dietitian every week and they say, yes, here's some recipes for you. This is how you eat, see you in 12 months. Because that's really how the rest of us follow diets. We read it in a magazine or in a brochure, and then or in a book or on a website, and then we go and do it for ourselves. So the last thing I was curious about is, what do people actually eat? So if you say go and eat that, are they actually eating half a cow for breakfast? Or are they making paleo brownies? Or are they fasting using, I don't know, jelly? So that was what I was curious to find out. So I'm very quickly just going to talk. So for the scientists amongst us, that was our overarching, can you see that? Sorry, it's hiding behind. I might just shrink them, is that all right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, everyone. So that was our overarching objective of our study. Pretty much what we just said.
Oh, I think it's a bit like on the screen.
Okay. All right. Just for completeness, the SWIFT was a larger study that looked at other things. So what I'm talking about today were just the diets, which you can see along the top. So we had 250 people and they each got to choose a diet. And that's the key point here. So we didn't randomize people. They came into our study, they got given information about these diets, and then they got to choose the one that they thought would suit them best. And again, that I know the scientists amongst us are going, oh, that's going to bias the results, but that was kind of the point, was to see what happens in the real world. They also got exercise interventions, and they got somewhat we call monitoring support strategies. So I'm not going to talk about those, and the short version is they didn't actually make any difference anyway, but they were there. So who would do a diet study in Dunedin? Surprisingly, we got so many people to sign up for the study. I think we did a piece in the ODT, and overnight we had 700 people applying for the study. And it crashed our database. It was amazing. All my science friends are like, oh, we can't get participants. And I was like, I can get participants. And we took anyone with BMI of 27 or greater. So that's a body mass index. It's not very big. It's just basically slightly above normal. Just anyone who wanted to lose weight and was basically healthy. And again, one of the problems with trials is that we only take truly healthy people. It's not representative of the general population. So people who had things like high blood pressure and asthma, depression and so on, they were included as part of our study, because they're the sort of people who might want to be on a diet. And surprisingly, in Dunedin, we had a whole lot of middle-aged New Zealand and European educational people. It was Dunedin. And the average BMI of 33. So not just kind of what you might expect, pretty normal, really. We had 2/3 of our participants being women, and that was actually a major success story of this study, because normally it's 100% female participants in diet studies. So mysteriously, we managed to get 1/3 of participants being male, and that was because of the fasting. So when we looked at who chose each diet, there was really no difference in any way between the groups of people that we could tell in terms of their education, their age, their gender, anything, except for the fasting group. For whatever reason, men preferred fasting over any other thing. So popular with males. Just again, for the people who like study diagrams, you can see we had 68 people choose Mediterranean and 136 people choose to do fasting. So fasting was our popular diet. Everyone was into fasting. And sadly, but perhaps not unsurprisingly, not many people wanted to do paleo. It was all over the news, and yet no one actually wanted to do it. So, and all I really want to say about that is, as with any diet study, as we went through 12 months, you can see we lose people to follow up, because people don't like staying in the study, especially if they don't like the diet. So I've gone straight to the results. What worked? Well, the first thing that people want to know was fasting or paleo better for weight loss, like all the hype said? So short answer is no, or perhaps no or yes in a very little small way. So statistically, no real differences between the groups after 12 months. All of the diets lost a little bit of weight. The fasting lost, you can see, about 4 kilos on average. That's over the whole group. And paleo the least. Not a lot of difference. Doesn't sound really impressive. But I guess you have to think about it. This is over a whole group, so there's quite a variety. Some people went up. I had someone who went down by about 20 kilos, and mysteriously I had someone who went up by 25. That wasn't a success story, but yeah, the short version is that we analysed this by the people who finished the study, because obviously if people left the study, we couldn't weigh them. But we included them whether or not they were still following the diet. So what we were really testing was the idea of giving someone this recommendation. So if we told you to go fasting and you did it for a month and went, I hate this, I'm never doing it again, but you agreed to stay in the study and come back and get weighed at the end of it, you're still analysed. So we did a couple of sensitivity analyses to see what the difference, how it was affected by the dropout, and basically we might have overestimated our results by about 1 kilo, or if people were we only took into account people who adhered to their diets, they might have done better by 1 kilo. So it's a little bit underwhelming, but it's not all bad. If I gave you a recommendation and then you came back 12 months later and you were 4 kilos lighter, clinically that's quite important. And most of us probably would think 4 kilo weight loss over a year that was sustained was a good thing. But nothing was better. But of course, health isn't just about weight loss. And there was a lot of other things that we wanted to measure. And one of those other things is metabolic markers of health. And again, intermittent fasting was very promoted to people who are diabetic or pre-diabetic, saying it's really good for blood sugar control. And we were hoping to see that, but we didn't. What we actually saw is that people who chose to follow the Mediterranean diet, they had a slightly superior reduction in the overall blood sugar levels after 12 months. And both the Mediterranean and the fasting diets did lead to important drops in blood pressure. So we're talking about on average 5 or 6 millimetres of mercury, which is clinically significant. So, I mean, that's a good thing. All the diets did show benefits. So all the diets, everyone did lose some weight. Everyone improved the diastolic blood pressure. Everyone had a smaller waist, and everyone's cholesterol's kind of improved in a small but beneficial way. So it wasn't all bad. I think what we can say is that all were good, but just not amazingly. We were hoping for some kind of cleverer and smarter things. We were thinking that perhaps we would show that one of these diets would be good in terms of your risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So high sensitivity CRP is a marker of inflammation in the blood and was thought to be one of those things that predicted whether or not you get heart disease and have a stroke or heart attack. And we thought maybe we could show that our diets help people and reduce their CRP, but we didn't see that. And ghrelin was a clever endocrine marker as a hormone in the stomach that basically drives your appetite. And we were quite interested to see if any of these diets perhaps suppressed your appetite, because that would be a nice thing. We didn't find that either. So I wasted a lot of money on really expensive blood tubes. So I think what everyone really wants to know is, what diet is actually doable? So all of them can help you in a small way, but like really, if you can't stick at it or it's horrible, what's the point? So the first thing we looked at was adherence. So after 12 months, who's still doing these diets? And in our Mediterranean group, about 57% of people said they were still following, which doesn't sound too impressive, but when you look at Paleo, that was down at 35%. So Paleo was the smallest group for a start, and then not many people stuck at it. Then fasting, about half of the people said they'd still do it after 12 months. So I'm not sure if you call that a win. The other thing we did was a diet score, which is just basically a score of how much people liked the diets. And you can sort of see there's a whole lot of factors about, is the diet easy to follow? How hungry were you? How well did you feel? How expensive it was? All these things that make you like eating in a particular way. And again, our Mediterranean actually came out on top. So, but all of the diets were, above 50, so they were tolerable. People didn't hate them. But surprisingly, we didn't find the new novel approaches were particularly better. So finally, the last thing we were kind of do is, what do people actually do when you tell them, hey, this is how you should eat? And then you go and find out, what did they actually eat? So I have a beautiful infographic here from my colleague Michelle Josby, who did this project with me, and is also a graphic designer, so I take no credit. And what we have here is, in each diet there were things that we recommend that people eat more and eat less. And so you can see there on the Mediterranean diet, for instance, people were recommended to eat more olive oil, and everyone said that they had olive oil every day. So that was a win. And as you sort of work your way down, you can see that they eat less. That if you look at the white bread and cereal bar there, even though we said you weren't supposed to be eating any white bread or cereals on a Mediterranean diet, there's a third of people, really maybe 2/3 of people still are. So maybe not every day, but it basically shows that adherence is never going to be 100%. And you can see there were some people who just weren't going to comprehend having fish. So we approached measuring fasting a little bit differently, because in fasting we didn't tell people what they could or couldn't eat, we just told them when they could eat. So what we tried to find out here was, how did people do fasting? And what emerged was a pretty standard pattern, was that a lot of people didn't have breakfast, some people didn't have lunch, almost everyone had their fasting meal as a dinner, and snacking went out the window. So on a fasting day, you know, it seemed that people would last out as long as they could throughout the day, and then have a little bit of food, then go to bed early, they used to tell me, so they were so hungry, and then next day they're allowed to eat again. So that was how people practiced intermittent fasting. Finally, the paleo, which was the most interesting to me because it was a slightly more complicated approach. People were very happy to eat the animal proteins. As you said, I don't think we had any vegetarians in our paleo group because there was no one who restricted those animal proteins. And people cheerfully using olive oils and butter, and some people had some fish. Interestingly, there wasn't a whole lot of uptake of legumes, and the most interesting thing about the paleo group was that in the avoid group, people quite happy to avoid things like breakfast cereal and sweetened drinks. But if you look at the grains and the sweet food bars, you can see that even though this is technically something you would never eat on a paleo diet, some people are eating grains every day, and there's like up to 75% of people are still eating grains, and probably like 50 or 60% of people are still eating sweet food, even though they're supposedly on a paleo diet. So I think what happened with the paleo diet is they included the things they were supposed to include, but they didn't restrict the things that were supposed to be restricted. Might explain why the paleo diet didn't do so well. And I think it's just a fact of life. Like, you know, we live in a world in which there are sugar and grains and sweet things, and they're in front of you every day. So, you know, it's interesting to see that that's just not that easy to resist in the real world. So overall, and also just sort of talking about the macronutrient content and some of the fibre and things that people took, the Mediterranean seemed to be the approach that was most tolerated and most enjoyed. They had best adherence and the highest diet score. And when we went through the actual diet records, they had the most fibre, which is supposed to be good for you, and calcium, and they pretty much did what they said they were going to do. The only thing they sort of, people still like their white bread and their cereals. With the fasting, people did do their fasting, but what happened is that they didn't fast to the level we suggested. So when we said get down to 25% of the normal intake or 500 calories, what we'd see is people might get down to 800. So they'd still have a significant energy reduction overall, but they're not quite as much as they were supposed to. Probably doesn't matter. I think overall this diet had the lowest energy intake compared to the other diets, and they did have the most weight loss, so it's kind of consistent. What was interesting to us was that we took a measure of something called ultra-processed foods. So this kind of the newest, trendiest thing is that the more processed a food is, the more it's being mashed up and fried and bound together, the worse it is for your overall health. And our fasting had the highest proportion of energy coming from ultra-processed foods compared to anyone else. And so I think from having followed people in the study, what happened was that on the diet days, they might grab packaged foods because it was easier because they had a calorie count, and then on their non-fasting days, they were less likely to make kind of wholesome, healthy choices because they're off the hook. They're like, I don't have to care. So that's what we saw in the real world. We did say eat a normal, healthy diet, but how that was interpreted might have been variable. And paleo, they had the lowest, even though they had the least impressive, I guess, overall findings, they were consuming the lowest percentage of processed food, with only 28%. And that's kind of consistent with the paleo philosophy. And their macronutrient ratios are quite different from the other group. So this group was eating a lot more fat and a lot less carbs, and it didn't seem to have made any difference in terms of all their results, but that was just, they were quite different. And as I said, up to 75% of them reported eating sugar and grains anyway. So paleo was not a win for most people. So in summary, what does it actually mean for everyone who's thinking about these diets? I guess the more positive note is that all of these diets did actually lead to benefit for most people and on average. Everyone had some weight loss, not everyone in the study, but overall on average, everyone gained some, there was weight loss, there were some metabolic benefits, and particularly impressive drops in blood pressure. So I think the take-home message is that if any of these approaches gel with you, then it's what we've shown, they're not any worse. Probably that you'll get results from any of these things. I would say if you're going to choose fasting, it appears to be important that the food selection on the non-fasting days is important. You can't get away with cheating, sadly. All of the diets, it seems that if you choose, in the words of Michael Pollan, eat real food, mostly plants, or something like that, seems to have held true. So if you choose unprocessed and whole foods, which a lot of plant-based, not necessarily solely plant-based, it does seem to lead to the metabolic benefits, pretty consistent with what the literature says. And adherence is a problem for everybody. And I just want to share that last little bit there. We had a free text box in our study where people could fill in details about what they thought of the study and what they thought of the diets. And if they weren't following the diets, why did they not follow the diet? And this person, if you can't see that, typed in, I forgot I was on the study. So welcome to a real world nutrition research. And I'm very happy to field questions. And I just want to say this, we're obviously lots of people on this team, amazing supervisors and lots of people and support from the university. Thank you.
That was really interesting.
It's just about half an hour. Perfect.
So on time. Great. So maybe we will start with any questions that people at home might have. So if you have any questions at home, please type them into the chat. I'll just try to share screen off. Okay, I think hopefully that was at the beginning. Okay, well maybe while people are starting to think of questions at home, do we have any questions in the audience? Yeah. Yes?
Was your data such that you could identify individuals who had very good or good compliance? And if you just looked at that subset, how would they perform across three diets?
It's a super good question. The short version is that we did do a sensitivity analysis to look at the people who reported adhering to their diet, and they potentially did about 1.2 kilo better in terms of weight loss, so not a major thing. Something else we were wanting to look at was seeing if certain subgroups of people responded to certain diets. So if there was, because we actually took a whole lot of like psychological and personality variables as well, which I haven't talked about here, and so whether there's certain personality types that might actually do better at fasting or do better at paleo. So that's a work in progress. Men, I think, did slightly better on fasting than women. But it was actually an initial effect and it kind of evened out. So in the first 6 months we thought, oh wow, the men are doing amazing. But then after 12 months it kind of it wasn't enough to be significant. So.
I have a follow-up question to that. Did you ask the men why they chose the fasting diet? Or?
Because it was my PhD. So I actually did a lot of the work in the study. So I actually talked to all the participants, and the feedback I had from males and feedback that offends anybody was that it was a lot easier to not have to make decisions about it. You could just decide to stop to eat and not have to think about, okay, I'm just not going to eat dinner. I don't have to think about what I'm supposed to be eating and whether it's right or whether I need to weigh it. I mean, I'm just generalising, but that was what people told me. It's an easier decision to make. I think women sometimes a bit more invested, obviously exceptions in food and food preparation. Sometimes guys just have to go, you know, I just don't think about it.
I'll take a couple of questions from people at home. So Tony asks, apart from fasting days, were there any calorie restrictions for any of the diets?
No. No calorie restrictions at all. We did give just kind of standard serving advice to all of the diets, and that, you know, like here's your plate and like a quarter will be protein and half will be veggies, just standard nutrition advice, but we didn't specifically restrict calories apart from fasting. And
another one from Kim, has there been a follow-up on adherence?
No, we didn't get funding.
That would be interesting.
But it would be interesting. A happy little side story is that when this ended up in the press maybe a month or two ago, we got contacted by one of our participants and who sent us a nice story and said, hey, this changed my life and I'm now 20 kilos lighter and I'm fit and well. So I know it's an unequal one, but it was just kind of nice to know that it actually helped and that someone got some benefit from it.
Did you have a question?
Oh yeah, I was just interested, because obviously adherence was an issue for some people. Did people cross over, like, oh, that group, I'm more aware now of the paleo, for example, so then they're delving into a bit of that?
We tried to stop them
Yeah.
because it messed with the study. So technically speaking, on our study, even though it was a real world study, you can't stop people doing, we assigned them to a diet and we analysed them per diet and we didn't give them resources for another diet.
Yes, yeah.
But whether people did it or not, we did actually ask at the end, you know, are you doing, what are your approaches? And there were a handful of people who did mess around.
Yeah.
Or tried everything at once.
Cool, another one at the back. And maybe we'll just repeat your question so the people at home can hear. So,
Yeah, just a question about fasting as well. I've read a couple of things that said it's good for men, but it's bad for ladies. Did you sort of do a comparison between the men and the women on the fasting to compare different metabolic?
yes.
So the question was there any difference between men and women with respect to fasting, particularly metabolic outcomes?
Yeah, yes. I suppose, yeah, what I read was that women, like in terms of their thyroid or their, like there could be a hormonal imbalance or something that's good on men.
I'm aware of that research, and to be fair, we didn't test thyroid levels, so we wouldn't have been aware of any changes to thyroid unless their own GP had picked them up and flagged them. And I think there was only one person in the study who became hyperthyroid, which is not the same. We didn't find anything in the analyses, but that might be because our numbers weren't big enough, and our metabolic measures weren't sensitive enough. I can say anecdotally, I think women were less likely to tolerate it. So the people who came back to me and said, it makes me hangry and I'm not going to cope and I'm going to eat all the ice cream, that was almost always women. And again, that just is something I observed, so I don't have numbers to back it up. In terms of effect on hormones, no one came back and said, my periods stop. But
We have another question from Vicky at home. What was the kg loss at the 6 month to 12 months? That seems like a long time to stay on a diet.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 12 months is a long time.
So from memory, there was most of the diets actually had lost slightly less at 6 months and then actually progressed at 12 months. So I guess the point is that they were supposed to be forever approaches. And so, they were designed to be not so much a diet as a way you would eat continually. And one of the big flaws in diet studies is they're short term, and you can show anything for 3 months. You can pretty much do anything for 3 months, but if you do it for 12 months, then that has a long-term effect on your health. So there wasn't much difference. We're talking about 1 or 2 kilos in difference between 6 and 12 months.
Yeah.
Nice presentation. What does this mean for the Ministry of Health guidelines in terms of diet recommendations for public health panel? What would you suggest to the Ministry of Health that must be advice on using diet?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So some countries have come out and suggested that intermittent fasting, for instance, should be something that we recommend for people who have say before. And to show the whole unprocessed food, which is sort of the offshoot of where paleo went to. And so, for instance, the Brazilian guidelines recommend choosing whole unprocessed foods and eating family. So I would say this isn't enough evidence to inform, what my public health hat on, it's not enough evidence to inform policy, but it would suggest that we're not really in a position to say that things like fasting and paleo are harmful. If they're done well, they can really be beneficial.
Did you find out if anyone had pre-existing conditions and they were taking supplements or medication, did you manage to see a drop in how much they needed to get from those things? Or?
So the question is about whether people were taking pre-existing medication or had conditions or taking supplements and whether the diets changed that. Yes, they got full medical screening because that was lucky, my job, because everyone in the study also was on the exercise program, so I did a full medical workup on everybody before they came in. We asked people whether they'd stopped or started medications at the end of it, but it's all just kind of one anecdotal thing. You know, like so some people would maybe have decreased their blood pressure medication, but I couldn't consistently say everyone decreased their blood pressure medication. Most people in our study didn't have particularly major medical conditions, like they were basically healthy. There might be a few people on really minor medications, but no one was diabetic, for instance. So 5 millimeters of mercury is like that was the drop, was systolic blood pressure. Probably not enough to get you off blood pressure medication, but for an individual person who maybe had a bit of drop with that thing. So, good question. Needs a more detailed mechanistic study to answer it, I think.
Did you ask around, I presume something with family, and so was there any sort of indication or any questioning around any impact on, let's say, mums who are having some fatigue versus something with young family or anything?
Yeah, that was a really big part of the discussion that went into people choosing their diets at the start. So at the start, they were given information on all the different approaches, and you know, people had to consider that. You don't want to be cooking a different meal from your family. And a lot of those people either went for Mediterranean because it's kind of a standard healthy diet that you can kind of feed to your family, or they adapted their paleo by basically kind of, you know, taking out the grains from their meal, but you know, serving up the meal with rice for the rest of the family. Fasting, I think, was more of a challenge if you had a family. Like you're putting out a meal for everyone else, and then you're having your little salad. But they were things that we discussed with people.
Just out of curiosity, did you do any research around that, about perception of how people do?
Just like basic free text, you know, please tell us, you know, how you, so there's a diet score, which was just sort of a measure of how tolerable it was, and then just anything else you'd like to tell us. And people are quite variable, like, as you expect. So some people went, this is great, it's helped me so much, and other people like hated it, didn't do it after the first week. So I think that's the science of, I'm not a nutritionist, but the science of nutrition is that there isn't one science of it. And the key thing I take from this is that you need to find what works for you. If you do fasting and you love it and it works for you, fantastic, it's probably not doing you any harm. Ditto paleo, but that's not going to be right for everyone, so don't make your friends do it.
Another school of thought on fasting as opposed to 5 and 2. There's a daily fast where you fast for 16 or 18 hours in the course of the day. The thinking being there's something happening metabolically related to the fasting, aside from just the reduced calorie intake. What's your read on that?
Yeah, I think it's they're all variations on the same thing in some way. So restricted time feeding, which I think is what that's known as, where you know have 16-hour period or 18-hour period with no food. There's lots of underlying kind of mechanisms by which that could be beneficial, and I think it probably is a good thing to do for most people. And I suspect 1 or 2 people in the study adopted that instead of what they were supposed to be doing. Benefits to, I guess, forcing your metabolism to switch from digesting and using energy to having to recycle nutrients and, you know, making your metabolism more flexible. It's probably a good thing. It's an alternative approach to fasting, basically.
Cool. Just for everyone at home, Christina is typing out the questions as we go, so if you can't hear what they're about. There was one earlier which I think I missed, was from Melanie. Do you follow any specific diet trend?
I know, this question always comes up. And I know people in the audience here know I live on wine and chocolate. But I guess I don't slavishly follow any one thing. I try and take the best aspects out of all of them. So I think overall kind of mainly whole foods and unprocessed foods. Don't have heaps of grain-based foods, but happy to eat sushi occasionally. And it's okay to stop eating every once in a while for most people. So not kind of obsessive fasting, I can only eat 500 calories in a day, but maybe I just won't eat until lunchtime today. And I think that's probably quite good for you.
So what's the back?
Was the exercise regime the same for each diet?
So the design of the study was that they not only got to choose their diet, but they also got to choose from 2 different sorts of exercise. So one was just the standard 30 minutes a day push play, and the other was high intensity interval training. And you might have expected some differences between those, but actually in those 2 groups overall, there's no difference in outcomes. And the diet results I presented were adjusted for exercise group and physical activity. So.
By the end of your study, did you find that there were any participants that did an ongoing, like, quite a restrictive caloric restriction, like, beyond just, like, what you just recommended?
There's always someone.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
hey, we're back
Yeah.
to use.
There was someone who just radically started fasting in a crazy way and just kind of, weight went like this. And they were still doing it at the end of the study. To be fair, they still hadn't quite reached a normal weight, so I hadn't got worried. But yeah, I mean, some people always do things to the nth degree. We had someone who was in an exercise group who was on the rowing machine doing high intensity intervals for an hour and a half every day, which was not what we recommended, but he did it anyway.
Cool. We got any more questions from the floor? Nope. Any more from anyone online?
I haven't seen any.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up there then. Thank you, everyone. Finally enjoy your flight.
Happy to take any questions.
And thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for everyone. Still got 24 people left online. So we're going to hopefully be back here again next month, if everything continues the way it is. And next month we have Rosie Crane from the Otago Museum, and she's going to be talking about the history of women scientists and their that have worked with the museum over the years. So we'll be sending out information, or you can just follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and another round of applause.